Welcome, fellow pilots, to I Want to Thermal Better. This is a slideshow for the paragliding pilot that is new to thermaling. This is a presentation that I put together regarding my own personal findings in regards to being able to find thermals and use them, as well as some tips from my mentors. You, as a thermaling pilot, want to get in them, stay in them, get to the top of them, and then go on glide to the next area where you hope to find more of them. Climb back up and go on glide again. Yep, this is the beginning of becoming a cross-country pilot. So I googled I want to thermal better, and this is what came up. To thermal better, focus on centering the core by tightening turns when lift is strong, surging, and flatten them in weak lift to map the thermal. Use weight shift to initiate turns and bank steeply. Lean hard to stay in tight cores, keeping airspeed controlled with minimal brake input. Okay, I know every experienced PG pilot reading this has their own opinion in regards to what works best for them, what is most effective for them at their own personal site, and based on the amount of years that each pilot has been flying will determine how assured they are in wanting to share their own opinions. This presentation describes what works for me and how I have come to realize how it all works over my 18 years of flying at the time of making this video. Feel free to check out my April 17th video at Woodside Mountain. I'll leave the link in the description. The first thing I want to mention is your gear. Number one, are you 100% comfortable sitting in your harness for 2 or 3 hours? Best to hook it up to a simulator and really get comfortable in your harness. Adjust straps that need to be adjusted, then adjust again if needed until it is a perfectly comfortable place to be. Also, number two, how do you hold your brake toggles? Do you take a half wrap so that your index finger is applying pressure to the line so that you are 100% aware as to what the wing is getting for pressure? This helps to have a direct communication with the wing. This can be on the top of the brake handle or on the line. A half wrap is good. It's best not to take a full wrap, as there is a higher risk of spinning or stalling your wing, as you have just taken up 10 centimeters of line. Lastly, putting your hand through the toggle may result in your hand being stuck in the toggle when needing to go for your reserve and spinning your wing. Ultimately, you and your wing should become one in the environment in which you fly. Now, what are the senses we are using to identify and utilize thermals? Hearing the wind rush past our faces and noticing how the sound changes when we fly out of them. Second would be feeling the tug of the glider through our hands and harness, getting that first noticeable tug of lift. We also feel when we fly out of the thermal by getting a sense of the lack of lift or a feeling of sink or loss of pressure. Third is sight, seeing a tree on the top of a ridge rise or fall in relationship with the horizon or mountain on the other side when we are in sink or in lift. The tree on the ridge seems to go down in our view compared to the horizon or mountain when we are in lift, and the tree will seem like it is rising when we are in sync. Fourth is the sense of smell. Yes, there are times when you can actually smell when you enter a thermal. You can smell a freshly plowed field of grass or a fertilized field come up to you, as well as smoke from a fire. Any one of these can be thermal indicators. Special note, stay away from fire smoke, as hot, small coals can travel up thousands of feet on a good lapse rate day. You do not want to put burn holes in your brand new glider. Don't think taste is in there, but hey, 4 out of 5, that's pretty good. Okay, let's get started in regards to what is happening on the ground. Here we have a hot dirt field and a cool, moist row of trees, as sun has been heating and warming the earth for a few hours on this flyable day. With even one cool, moist tree, this will work. We now notice that the thermal layer of hot air has developed over the ground from the sun heating the ground. This is called radiation. We will now add 10 kilometers an hour of wind into the process of moving the hot thermal bubble of air across the ground. The idea here is let's give you some general information as to what is going on before I get into the specifics regarding how to use thermals while flying. We now see that the thermal bubble gets to an area where cooler air is present, and it is because of this temperature difference that the thermal triggers off. This is called convection. A thermal leaving the ground is often called a thermal plume or thermal bubble. It is a vertical current of rising warm air generated by solar heating of the Earth's surface, which creates convective lift, used by gliders, birds, hang gliders, and paragliders to gain altitude. It is a general standard rule that a thermal will trigger off with even 1 degree difference. In this case, the thermal is hotter than the surrounding cool air offered by the shade and moisture in the tree. We will also note that when grass is near or a grass field is next to a dirt field, that this temperature difference between the hot dirt and moist grass is also enough to trigger off the thermal. On a good lapse rate day, these thermals leave the ground and they go many thousands of feet up into the atmosphere. Please see my lapse rate video for more detail on thermal strength. Once the thermal reaches dew point, cloud is formed. Again, you may wish to watch my dew point video for more detail on this. In the early part of the day, thermal bubbles start releasing and triggering off. If you were to launch at this time, you would think, hey, great, I found a thermal. Then on the next 360, it's not there anymore. This is because the bubbles need to join together to form a column. Then you can climb out once the day is on. Next, we must note that the thermal has a body and a core. The core is upwind from the body of the thermal. We may be flying and going up in the body of the thermal, but if we want to go up faster, all we have to do, once centered in the thermal, is search upwind to find the core. We see that, in this case, the body of the thermal is going up 3 meters per second, and yet the core is going up 6 meters per second. We notice that the core of the thermal has a more vertical component to it, and the body of the thermal is generally downwind of the core. This also works in reverse. If you're getting jostled around in the core, all you have to do is fly downwind a little and enjoy going up in a smoother part of the thermal, which is the body. When we get a collapse, it's because we just flew out of the core upwind. There is another reason why the collapse happens out front of the core. We notice that there is sinking air associated with being outside the thermal. The difference between the two areas of +6 in the core and -3 in the sink, for this example, is a difference of 9 meters a second. That is a pretty big difference that your wing is flying through. A little hand pressure while leaving a strong thermal will keep your tips firm, and there will be a lesser chance of a wing tip tuck or collapse when leaving the thermal. If you get a 50% collapse, keep in mind that you can fly half of your wing perfectly fine while leaning and holding a safe visual direction. A little break to help with your course and direction is good while waiting for a reinflation. A quick look up to see what side you need to lean to and maintain heading control is most important. Fixing the collapsed wing tip is after you have obtained and are maintaining a safe glide. It will usually reinflate on its own if it's an A or B wing. A gliders, low Bs, mid Bs, and high Bs should reinflate in less than 3 seconds. Cs and D gliders need some input from the pilot to reinflate. Another point is that thermals start off small when they're near the ground and grow wider with altitude. They may be the size of your bathroom in the first couple 100 feet off the ground. They expand as they gain altitude, and within a few thousand feet, they can easily be the size of a department store. The atmospheric pressure as we go up decreases, and the thermal size increases. This is why we want to get into the thermal relatively near launch height, when it has already triggered off 1,000 feet below us, as we are able to enjoy finding a wider, more easily usable thermal out front of launch that has already started to expand, rather than getting low and having to work with a small radius thermal. Here is a basic understanding for the pilot that is new to doing thermal flying. Here we see that a glider has just launched. Will the pilot experience a bit of sink first before reaching the thermal? Yes, maybe. This is possible, so if you are in sink, you may have a thermal very close to you. You may have also launched with a lee wind over the back of the launch area if you are in a prolonged sink for a long period of time. I'll leave that for another video. Other times, a pilot may get right into the lifting thermal without experiencing any sink upon arriving at it, as some thermals do not have a noticeable sinking air column on the outside of it. Once in the thermal and doing 360 turns to map the size of it, and you are going up slowly, what do you need to do to go up faster? Yes, fly upwind a little to the core of the thermal that is rising more vertical. This is the hottest part of the thermal and is going up faster. Only fly 1 second towards the upwind area and then get back into your 360s. This is the general rule. You don't want to fly too far upwind, as you may fly out of it and then you got to go find it again. If the pilot flies too far upwind, he or she may be met with sinking air. A light tip tuck or a collapse may be the result. If you accidentally fly out of it, go back into it. The idea is that the pilot would generally do well to go back into the thermal, situate themselves in the thermal again, so that they are going up during the entire 360-degree turn and enjoy getting to the top of the thermal. Once the pilot has achieved the maximum altitude the thermal is able to offer, the pilot can then choose to go on glide until they reach the next thermal. The idea is to top up as much as you can on each thermal. Try not to be tempted to leave early before going on glide, as we are not always 100% sure where we will arrive at the next thermal, how much altitude will we need to regain, and where is the next trigger. Special note, after you know a site and where the thermal triggers are, you have a much better chance at extending your flight, getting high, and flying far on a good XC flight, which stands for cross-country flight. In the previous example, we noticed that a cool tree or even a row of trees will be a trigger for the thermals to go up after being developed from a rock, gravel, or dirt source. Here is another example of a trigger. Notice that the thermal is still being moved along with the wind across the ground, but now we see that it has met up with a stream. The stream is cooler than the thermal by at least 3 degrees, and therefore the thermal will not cross the stream. Instead, it will be triggered by it and go up. This concept is also thought about when thermals are trekking along a mountainside and they meet up with a stream. Vegetation generally does not create thermals as it is moist and cool, but those trillions of little rocks in the area can collectively gather some nice heat for you and thus produce a nice thermal for you. These thermals on a good lapse rate day can take you up over 10,000 feet if there's lots of rock or dirt exposed on a good spring day. If you have a choice between the green areas and the rock areas, fly closer to the rock areas and check to see if the green areas on the ridge are the trigger. If you have areas in sun and areas in shade, check the sun areas. If they have been heating for a while, you may have yourself an extra few kilometers right there. Small ponds may or may not be cooler than the surrounding air. It's worth the time to fly over them, slightly downwind, to see if they are triggering. Many times I have been surprised to gain a couple thousand feet from them, being good triggers as well. Here we see a side of a mountain being the trigger, as the thermal air is being brought up the side of a mountain, and it will track along the ground until it gets to the top of a spine or ridge and trigger off. There can and will be thermal source generators and triggers all over a mountainside. One of the best trigger sources we have in Western Canada is the large dead fir tree. They are gray in color, heat up as there is no longer water inside of them, and are wonderful triggers. Sometimes you will get half a mountainside of thermal source moving up the side of the mountain, and when a percentage of that thermal bubble comes in contact with the dead tree, you get the entire mountainside coming up and being released skyward off of the dead tree for you to thermal in. You can step up and climb up by flying to the next dead tree up on the mountainside as you climb up from your first. Please note that a group of them together sends up a nice thermal offering. On a good lapse rate day, you may get thermals popping off the highways as vehicles disturb the air and are hotter than the thermal and will release thermal bubbles that are moving along a field. In this case, we see lots of grass and vegetation at our Bridal Falls site, and thus there is not much for thermal activity over this highway. Asphalt is also porous and does not heat up like dirt or rock. Asphalt can actually hold moisture down inside its lower layers. Large dirt roads can also be good thermal sources. The thermal will move along them and sometimes be triggered by cool shaded tree areas or cool moist grass areas. Watch where the dust rises when a vehicle drives by, or where birds are thermaling. Also, deciduous trees and their leaves will be rustling. There may be a thermal visible by one of these noted signs in one area. This is where the thermal is leaving the ground and on a good lapse rate day may go thousands of feet up. Keep in mind that an eagle or vulture can help identify the location of a thermal and assist with a low save and get you back up to 9,000 feet. I must also mention in this presentation that you really need to know what your airspace looks like before you fly in it. You need to know to not exceed your CYAs, and of course we don't ever want to fly into controlled airspace without being certified to do so and know where those planes are coming through. Tractors are also a great trigger as they work in their hot dirt field. They are disturbing the air and they are hot as their engine is running. These two components pop the thermal bubble and a climbing thermal is the result. When they are downwind in their field, you get most of the field being the source of the thermal tracking downwind across their field to the tractor. In this example, it is the tractor that is the trigger. Other thermal triggers at the edge of a field could be a hot barn full of cows, or a hot tin roof, or a combination of both. Basically, the signs that thermals are present include other pilots are flying in them, birds are flying in them, clouds are being made by them, and tree leaves in one certain area are being rustled by one or more of them as they leave the ground. It's important that you check to see what your lapse rate is for the day before trying to make it a thermal practice day. General lapse rate information needed for the thermal practice day is in another one of my videos, link below in the description. You will need the hottest ground temperature for the day and the 6,000 foot temperature for the day. AWWS Flight Planning has changed their format, so now I use the RASP as well as windy.com. Now let's look at the thermaling experience. After launching, number one, get well away from the hill. You must be able to take a few 360-degree turns without concern of other pilots in the area, as well as lots of ground clearance. Be mindful of that first valuable signal after you have lots of altitude to work with. Upon your first good signal, look, lean, and turn a 360-degree turn and see if it is strong enough to work with. You may choose to go out farther and find a better one. Always be sure that you can easily make it to your LZ. Don't scratch too low in so that it makes it hard to get back to the LZ and getting there becomes a gamble. If you get into lift, it's a bonus. But if you get into sink, a bailout field may be your only option. Okay, so here's the plan you want to keep in your mind and review often so that these steps become habit, as you won't be able to read while flying. Number one, launch and get well away from the hill. Number two, you need to be able to comfortably do a few 360-degree turns without gambling with the terrain or other pilots. Number three, if you get lift on your first attempt, great. Keep in mind that you may accidentally turn and sink, in which the bank angle as well as the sink may cost you altitude. Number four, you will then need to concentrate and be well aware as to the signal you get from the next thermal you come in contact with. Number five, if the lift is noticeable on your right, do your first 360 turn on the side you felt the lift from. Remember to always clear your turn, look, lean, and turn. Be confident with your weight shift. Number six, what once was just jostle is now a valuable signal. Number seven, if you're going up a bit, great. Continue. All the while, you are going to need to watch your height above ground, above trees, and watch for other pilots approaching. Most are mindful of your efforts and will let you gain height before flying over to your thermal. Number eight, if there is another pilot in the thermal, you must turn in the direction that they are turning in. Number nine, now is the time to move your 360-degree turns into the center of the thermal column. I have diagrams explaining more on this soon. Number 10, if you fly out of it, you will notice a lack of pressure on your outside wingtip. You may get a wing tuck or a collapse. Gain your spatial awareness and be able to know what direction you were flying in when you flew out of the thermal, and then go back into it by being able to identify where it is based on your position in your 360-degree turn. Number 11, thermals will widen with altitude, so staying in it will become easier with altitude and practice. Number 12, once you are going up during your entire 360-degree turn, you may push upwind for just a second as the core of the thermal is upwind, is hotter, and has the most lift that the thermal has to offer. And finally, number 13, on the other hand, if you're getting bashed around in the core, just go downwind a little bit and get your wing into the body of the thermal. It's still going up, just not as fast and not as strong as the core. Now, let's use the tractor for explaining how to utilize the thermal. This will be the same information and techniques you will use for mountain flying. First, you will want to approach it slightly downwind as the thermal coming up from most all triggers tracks slightly downwind from the trigger. Hey guys, can I get some wind direction in there, please? Yeah, thanks. If this is the perceived wind direction as you approach at altitude, your questions may be: how high are you regarding how much altitude do you have to work with? How much lean will there be to the thermal based on wind strength? And it's good to check to see if there are any indications that a thermal is being made. Number 1, is there dust? Number 2, birds. Number 3, a cloud above. Sometimes you don't have any signs and just want to come and take a look to see if there is something there. Spend a little time checking and then check somewhere else if it's not workable, as you may sink out. Sometimes there is a trigger waiting for you at the downwind edge of the field. For this example, let's say you arrive at 3,000 feet AGL. You can burn off a few hundred feet of altitude checking this before you may decide to go look at another thermal source and trigger. You want to approach with a slight S-turn pattern, as we don't quite know where it is tracking up. Normally we can't see it, so we take our best guess based on our perceived wind speed, direction, and visual trigger after identifying the thermal source. Ultimately, we know that there is a pretty good chance that the tractor will release a thermal if the field is dry. A couple of main reasons why we don't get a thermal off one is that the field may be wet, or it may be a low lapse rate day. Generally, the first thing you notice is a slight bit of lift on your right or your left, with the thermal rushing air past your face. Sometimes you can fly straight into the thermal straight on, but it's generally on your right or your left. For this example, let's say that you feel your right wing tip get lifted. Most pilots that are beginning to thermal will turn right away. It's best to get into the thermal before turning, or you may turn out of it. If your first turn is too early, as I identify a thermal, I will say 1, 2, and now, and start my 360s right there. Keep in mind that we need to be at least 1,000 feet above. 2,000 to 3,000 is optimum. Realistically, at 3,000 feet, your tractor will look like this. Okay, here is an example where the pilot turned too quickly and flew out of the thermal. Most pilots that are beginning to thermal will turn into their 360-degree turns right away, as soon as they feel the lift. This will result in a percentage of the 360-degree turn being in lift, while another percentage of the 360-degree turn is in normal air or sink. The idea is to move your 360-degree turns over to the area that the lift is noticeable on. Pay attention as to where you are in lift during your 360s and move your 360-degree turns over a little to the lifting area. Super important. You now notice that the entire 360-degree turn is resulting in lift. The idea is to stay in it and get to the top of the thermal before going on glide. You can also choose to go up the same thermal again, or go on glide and go up again by use of any other trigger in the area. If you sink out, be sure to have a grass area within easy glide. I will go over some XC landing thoughts later in this video. If you fly out of it, you will notice that your outside wingtip just received lesser pressure. The idea is to 360 in the same direction, but move your 360s back into the area of lift. Your second question that will get you to the top of the thermal is, well, first of all, where am I in the lift? And second of all, where am I not in lift or in sink? A quick loss of pressure says it's on the other side, wherever you are during your 360 turn. It's a game of concentration. You now notice that the entire 360-degree turn is resulting in lift again. Stay in it, or you may wish to search for the core of the thermal and go up faster. Where's the core? Yep, it's at the upwind side of the thermal. Just do small 1-second searches forward and then get back into your 360-degree turns. We now take a closer look at the thermal you are flying in and realize that the strongest part of the thermal is upwind. It has more vertical strength and will help you climb faster. For those who are new to this, upwind means towards where the wind is coming from. This is where you take that little 1-second move forward and see if you can identify the core, as it is all invisible. And if you fly too far, you will fly past it and out of the thermal. The body of the thermal may be going up 3 meters a second, but the core for this example is going up 6 meters a second. Once in the core, the strategic thing to do now is to tighten your 360s and stay in the core. This is called coring the thermal. I'm sure that you've heard the term. It's amazing the first time that you do this, as you may be thinking, with this tight of a 360, normally I would be carving down, but in this case, I'm going up rather well. If you are on the side of the core, the air will feel bashy, as you are part in the strong lift and part in the sink or normal air. You can always choose to go back into the body of the thermal again and get yourself centered again. This would be the time to flatten out your turns and get comfortable again. Now we will talk about the lean of a thermal. The stronger the wind, the more the lean. Once it is really strong, the thermal actually rips apart. But for this video explanation, we will only be presenting winds that are workable, and you would not want to fly in more than 20 kilometers an hour wind while learning this stuff. The yellow thermal suggests that we have a slight lean to the thermal and a low wind. More lean with the orange thermal that has a medium wind, and a stronger leaning red thermal suggests an angle in a strong wind that shows that the thermal can and will track far downwind. This is also the case inland on mountains. We want to be very careful to not fly into sink of the thermal on a strong wind day, as you may see the trees coming up underneath you pretty darn quick. Let's stay with lighter winds while we are learning to thermal better. We now introduce some other triggers. Trillions of rocks are warming on the mountainside in the sun, and the thermals that are created will trickle up until they meet up with a trigger that is either 3 degrees hotter or 3 degrees cooler to trigger off. As previously mentioned, they will also leave and go up at the top of a spine. Trigger temperatures can vary based on lapse rate, but for this example, we will use the maximum 3-degree trigger temperature. In this case, we have a large dead tree that has no water in it. It is receiving direct sunlight and is easily 3 degrees hotter than the warm thermal under it at the base. There are times that you may get the entire side of a mountain slope of thermal coming up one large dead tree. When you see 3 or 4 of these in one area grouped together, you are surely in for a treat. I have had on many occasions gained many thousands of feet off of dead trees. They are gray in color and are usually quite reliable for altitude gain. Thermals will be made on the side of a mountain and will trigger off at the tops of the ridges as well as the summit. Warm, moist air will condense at dew point, where we will see the thermals making clouds. See my dew point video for more information on that. In dry climates, there may be what are called blue thermals, where they are strong and will take you to 12,000 feet, but there's no cloud associated with the blue thermal. Because the air is dry, the dew point may be at a much higher altitude than the thermal goes to. For example, if a thermal tops out at 9,000 feet and dew point is 10,000 feet, there will not be a cloud associated with the thermal. If the dew point is at 8,000 feet and the thermal goes to 9,000 feet, yes, there will be a cloud as the thermal has reached the dew point temperature that is present at 8,000 feet. The perfect day is when you get a low wind with a good lapse rate. You may wish to go up and fly in and out of one thermal and re-enter it at a lower altitude all day for practice. This is just to get used to it, as you now know where it is. It's large enough to work with, and once the thermal starts feeding, it is usually good for most of the flying day. Some sites start as early as 10:30 a.m. Other sites, thermals start kicking off around 11 or 11:30 a.m. The idea is to wait until you have reliable thermals out front and other pilots are launching and climbing up in them. This is a convincer that the thermals are working. Now it's your turn to go out there and make use of them. If the day starts to get too strong for your comfort level regarding the launch conditions, then maybe grab a bite and come back around 5 p.m. and get ready to launch around 6 or 6:30 p.m. when the thermals are still working. They are generally not as strong at that time of day as they were at midday. On the west coast, our strongest conditions are springtime, April and May. Be sure to buy and use your anemometer/wind meter often and record what you were comfortable launching in and what you found for a wind reading that was too strong. Keep in mind that the wind up front of launch is mixed with thermals. It's not just wind. Knowing your lapse rate for the day is a big help. Now, based on wind direction at altitude, thermals may also change direction with different wind layers. You may say to yourself, it felt like a thermal going straight up. But when you look at your IGC file in Sports Track Live, you notice that it changed direction while you were thermaling. The interesting thing is that you did not notice it while flying. You were 100% focused on the signals and other pilots around you once you were clear of the terrain. Once you start to get to know a site, take a quick peek down and see where the thermals are triggering off of. Next time you fly there, you will remember where the good thermal triggers were and you hope to be able to use them again. I find that the more sites that I fly, the more I know what to look for. I hope that the clues in this presentation help you find your thermal triggers, whether it be in a mountain site or flatland flying. There are many P2 sites around the world that all have various strengths of thermals to work with. Be sure to get a briefing at any new site and ask where the house thermals are. Also, be sure that you have walked the LZ and bailout fields, as you don't want any challenging surprises in your first year of flying. Always be mindful that as you are gaining thermal practice, that you must always have a safe glide to a safe LZ. It's kind of like needing to think of two things at the same time. Number one is working the thermal, and number two is where you may need to land when you are starting to get low. Remember that as the wind grows stronger, your glide is also degraded into wind. Thus, you will have a better glide downwind, but no sharp turns into wind when ready to land. Stay alert and don't gamble with high wind if it grows stronger while you are flying. Inversions. You may know how this works, but if not, here's a basic idea. Thermals will trigger off and rise up in air that is cooler than the thermal. The thermal will stop rising when it becomes the same temperature as the surrounding air, as it has no more power to rise. We notice that above the inversion layer, the air is cool again. The thermals that trigger off up there above the inversion are warmer than the surrounding air. They will trigger off and go up. There are times that a thermal will break through the inversion layer, but for this lesson, let's just introduce you to the idea that thermals can be punchy and strong below, but if an inversion is present, it may not reach its full potential in getting you up high. See my lapse rate video for more detail on this. Now, this is a super basic explanation regarding the swirling direction of a thermal. Note that the thermal is a counterclockwise micro low pressure system. In the northern hemisphere, if you turn your glider 360 degrees in a clockwise direction, you will have a slightly slower ground speed in the thermal. And if you turn counterclockwise going with the thermal's direction, you will have a slightly faster ground speed, as you will be flying in the same direction as the thermal's rotation. On a low lift day, you may find it more effective to turn right than turning left in the northern hemisphere. The reverse of all of this would be found in the southern hemisphere. Let me know your experience in the comments below. Now, this video is not to be a full-blown meteorology lesson. Rather, it is for understanding good thermic conditions and how we can use them. The basic idea is to understand that we don't want a really dramatic low pressure, as that would mean we are flying in a thunderstorm environment. And we also don't want a predominant high pressure in the area, as that would be resulting in a low lapse rate, and thus not having any workable thermals. We actually want conditions that are somewhere in between, where we are getting good thermals, but not too strong. As you are getting better at thermaling, remember to look up once in a while. It is best that you can always fly to the blue sky. You need to be able to leave at an angle so that you can escape the cloud suck and head out to the valley. Usually leaving at a 45-degree angle when approaching the cloud is good. You may be thermaling up at 2 to 3 meters per second, and then all of a sudden you may notice that you are going up steady 6 or 7 meters per second. This is the cloud suck kicking in. It happens because heat is generated when moist air becomes moisture at cloud base, where the dew point temperature is. The condensation process releases latent heat, the energy stored in water vapor. When it's time to leave your thermal because you are getting close to the cloud base, notice the visual direction you wish to fly to. Picking a small landmark like a river, a road, or a pond below is good, and visually check your heading, as if and when you accidentally go up into the cloud, you will still see the water if in the cloud just a bit, and your heading will confirm that you are heading out to the valley, not towards the mountain. Remember, when in mountainous areas, if and when you go into the white room, fly away from the mountain and out to the valley. If heading into the white room because you may have waited too long or did not realize that the cloud was directly above you, notice the direction you wish to fly to. Pick a compass heading and pull big ears and add speed bar if needed. Hold your direction. You may go into the white room momentarily, but eventually you will come out. Most importantly, that you trust your compass, as the white room can be disorienting. Just keep repeating to yourself, I've got this. Best to review the VFR rules as well in regard to cloud clearances. On really strong days, there may not be any blue to fly to. Best to have your descent techniques practiced so that you know in order which ones you may or will need. Usually just a normal glide to the side of the cloud is good. Then glide to the next thermal area, staying on the upwind side of the clouds. XC thoughts or cross-country thoughts. Always have a plan B. You may want to get to the next mountain range, but you may have to land in a nearby field or paddock. Never leave yourself without a plan B. If you have to choose between trees and water, choose the trees, as there is a much better chance you will be able to fly again. Water, especially moving water, without a rescue boat is not a good choice. A grass field is best. I will give you some details later as to what to watch for on your way in. It can be mentioned that when you are below 3,000 feet, you can choose to visually fly the terrain. And when you are above 3,000 feet, you may choose to fly the clouds. It's your choice. Having a device that records an IGC file is great, as you can see what you have done on Sports Track Live afterwards. When flying the clouds, note that they are usually being fed by a thermal at the upwind forward third area. Lining up a cloud street is great for staying in lift on a straight glide. Okay, when it's time to land, as you are now on an XC flight and your regular LZ is no longer an option, here are some tips to think about upon setting up your landing. Be sure to get a briefing from a local instructor to find out if there are any no landing areas. Some farmers have made it very clear to the paragliding club that their fields or some of their fields are off limits for a landing option. It's up to you as the pilot in command to find out this information before launching with the plan of an XC flight in mind. Once you are cleared to go and you are qualified and you know the airspace you will be flying in, it is time to review this list just before launching. Number 1, you are to land in a grassy field area. Number 2, watch for power lines, as sometimes you will only see the poles to be visible. Know the lines are there. Number 3, make sure there are no cattle in your chosen field. Number 4, do your best to choose a flat field, as fields with slopes, dips, and valleys can be challenging. Number 5, discern your wind direction using water ripple on lakes, ponds. Look for smoke or dust movement. Check your ground speed in both directions and look for cloud shadows moving. Other pilots may also be landing. Number 6, watch for fences and gates as you are coming in. See if you're able to notice a corner gate to exit the field. It's best not to climb on fence wires. Number 7, once landed, be ready to hand over some cash to the disgruntled farmer that may be approaching you, as you just bought those cabbages you just landed on. If you accidentally landed in a crop and are a visitor, it's best to mention it to the local pilot so they can be ready to explain. Be sure to have a device that works with satellite for texting, as you may be outside the phone signal area. Most radios are good for 5 to 10 kilometers. A radio may not be an option to communicate with your driver or other pilots. Number 9, check with the local pilots to see if it is safe to hitchhike in the area you wish to fly before launching. Okay, let's get back to thermaling. Sometimes you'll be on a slope ridge inland where there is very little lift along the grassy ridge area. What you are looking for is a thermal that is kicking off out front. By going along the ridge, and checking the ridge for the best lift area, what you are actually doing is checking for the back side of the thermal that is triggering off out front. There's a good chance that the slight thermal signal that you are getting is indicating that there's stronger lift upwind, just out in front of the ridge. You may be surprised that the better part of that lift is a thermal releasing out front. So you get the idea that there is a fair amount of things you need to know, skills you need to build, and an awareness that will grow over time. It's like playing an instrument. Having the technique is good, and to get better you need to practice effectively. Being tired, hungry, or dehydrated is not going to help you. So, here we go. Here are some other points to being able to thermal better. Number 1, have a good night's rest. Number 2, eat a good breakfast. Number 3, stay hydrated. Number 4, have an energy bar just before you launch. Number 5, check your higher altitude temperatures expected for the day and dress warm so that you are comfortable if it's cold up high. And number 6, talk with other pilots that know the site well and ask them where the best thermals are expected. As with most sites, there is a house thermal that works once the sun heats up the sourced areas. Also, there is no standard thermal rule other than turn direction. So, if you are working a thermal on a slope near ridge height, you still need to give way to pilots that are coming down the ridge with the ridge on their right. Most will be courteous, some will not. There are lots of great alto varios on the market. Alto stands for altimeter and vario stands for variometer. Best to check with your local schools and dealers to see what they can get you. Also, you may choose to download an app to your phone. Be sure to Velcro it to your flight deck as well as add a tether. Paragliding Line works great for this. For iPhone, Fly Sky High is widely considered the best, most comprehensive flight instrument app for the iPhone. It's ideal for paragliding. Choose a tone and volume you like, and as they say, when it's beeping, turn. For Android, XC Track is a premier free Android flight application designed for paragliding, boasting over 100,000 downloads and a 4.6 star rating. It offers real-time XC navigation. Remember to get used to it before you fly, as you don't want to be staring at your screen when flying. Just a quick peek should be good when in flight. Try and get to as many paragliding sites as you can that are rated for your skill level, and remember, there is no flight we need to do today that will jeopardize our ability to fly tomorrow. Also remember that altitude is your friend, as you may feel a little on edge when a few thousand feet off the ground. Also keep in mind that the higher you are, the more time you have to figure stuff out. Lastly, arrive at the site early and watch it grow. Get your gear ready, and when it's good, be ready to launch. The last thing you want is to arrive later when it's already too strong. Thermaling? Embrace it, enjoy it, and feel free to like and subscribe for more free paragliding educational videos like this one. Okay guys and gals, see you out there.